"You're too outspoken for an occasion like this," my mother said, her tone carrying that familiar judgment I'd heard my entire life. She stood in my living room, arms folded, regarding me as though I were a problem she needed to contain. "Cousin Rebecca's wedding will be refined and tasteful. We can't risk you making a scene." I set down my tea slowly, absorbing her words. My entire family had received invitations to Rebecca's destination wedding in Charleston, South Carolina. Everyone except me. My name is Amanda. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a digital content strategist for a creative agency here in Denver, Colorado. I've always been the outlier in my family, the one who questioned things, who spoke truth even when it made people uncomfortable. Apparently, that made me outspoken. "I wish them well," I said calmly, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. Inside, though, I was devastated. This wasn't simply about missing a wedding. This was about being deliberately excluded from a major family milestone because my own mother considered me too problematic. Mom shifted uncomfortably, clearly anticipating more pushback. "It's not personal, Amanda. Rebecca specifically asked for a conflict-free celebration. And you know how you get when certain topics come up. How I get. Like when I'd challenged my uncle's offensive comments at Thanksgiving, or when I'd defended my cousin Lisa during family gossip about her career choices. Standing up for what's right apparently made me the family liability. When is it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Next weekend. It's a 4-day event at a historic plantation venue. They're doing it properly. Welcome dinner, ceremony, and a reception that's supposed to last until sunrise." She was practically glowing about an event I wasn't invited to. "Your Aunt Carol says it's being photographed for a bridal magazine." Of course it was. Rebecca had always been the family's golden child. Successful career, wealthy fiancé, picture-perfect life everyone admired. Now she was having the kind of wedding that would grace magazine pages, meticulously planned for maximum social media impact. "That sounds lovely," I said. "I'm sure everyone will have a wonderful time." My mother looked confused by my composure. She'd clearly expected tears or arguments that would validate her point about why I couldn't be trusted at refined family events. "You're not upset?" she asked suspiciously. "Why would I be upset? You've made it clear my presence would diminish the occasion. I respect Rebecca's wishes for her special day." I picked up my phone and began scrolling through my calendar as if already making alternative plans. The truth was, I felt crushed. But I'd learned long ago that showing vulnerability to my family only gave them ammunition. They wanted to see me as the unstable one so they could justify treating me as lesser. My mother lingered a few more minutes, clearly hoping for the reaction she expected. When I didn't provide it, she made an excuse about needing to help with wedding preparations and left. As soon as the door closed, I sank onto my couch and let the weight hit me. My own family had decided I wasn't worthy of inclusion in one of their most important celebrations. They'd held discussions, made decisions, sent invitations, booked accommodations, all while deliberately leaving me out. I thought about all the family gatherings I'd attended over the years, all the times I'd stayed silent when relatives said things that made me uncomfortable, all the effort I'd invested in maintaining relationships with people who clearly viewed me as a burden. But as I sat there, something else began rising alongside the hurt. A spark of defiance. They thought I was outspoken. They thought I would cause a scene at their precious, perfect wedding. I opened Instagram and scrolled through Rebecca's feed. Her engagement photos were immaculate, professional shots that belonged in bridal publications. Her wedding hashtag was already trending among family and friends. Everything was perfectly curated, perfectly planned, perfectly designed to showcase their perfect life. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Sarah. "Want to meet tonight?" "I have exciting news." I smiled for the first time since my mother's announcement. Sarah always had impeccable timing. She was a wedding photographer, one of the most sought after on the West Coast, and had been working constantly for months. "Definitely," I texted back. "I have news too." That evening, I met Sarah at our favorite wine bar in the Highlands neighborhood. She was practically vibrating with excitement when I arrived. "You won't believe what just happened," she said before I could sit. I just booked the most incredible last-minute wedding. Dream venue, unlimited budget, and the couple specifically wants something that will resonate online. They saw my portfolio and hired me immediately. That's amazing, I said, genuinely happy despite my situation. When is it? Next weekend. I know it's short notice, but they had a cancellation and they're paying triple my usual rate. She paused, studying my expression. Wait, why do you look devastated? I told her everything about the family exclusion, about being labeled too outspoken, about missing Rebecca's magazine-worthy wedding, because my own mother thought I was an embarrassment. Sarah's expression darkened with every word. Are you serious? They excluded you from a family wedding because you have integrity and a backbone? I was never invited in the first place, I corrected. They just made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. This is outrageous. You're the most loyal person I know. You've tolerated their nonsense for years and this is how they repay you? Sarah shook her head in disgust. You know what? Come with me to this wedding next weekend. It's going to be absolutely spectacular. The idea of attending someone else's wedding to avoid dwelling on my family's rejection seemed both appealing and slightly pathetic. But Sarah wasn't accepting refusal. I'm serious, she said, leaning forward with that determined expression she got when plotting something. The couple specifically said they want authentic moments and artistic documentation. Having you there as my assistant would be perfect. I could use help with social media content, and you're brilliant at that. I don't know anything about wedding photography, I protested. You don't need to. You understand digital content. You know what makes things shareable. And honestly, I need someone to help capture behind-the-scenes moments. This couple wants comprehensive coverage, including social media content they can use immediately. The more she talked, the more intrigued I became. I'd worked in digital marketing long enough to know what made content go viral, and wedding content was particularly powerful when done authentically. Where is this wedding? I asked. Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs. They've reserved the entire visitor center, and they're doing the ceremony against the red rock formations. It's going to be magical. Sarah's eyes sparkled with excitement. The bride is an influencer and the groom owns a software company. They met through mutual friends and got engaged after 6 months, but they didn't want to wait. There was something refreshing about that story. A couple who knew what they wanted and pursued it instead of spending years worrying about appearances. It was the complete opposite of my family's approach, where image mattered more than substance. What time is the wedding? I asked. Saturday afternoon starting at 3 p.m. Everything's designed to maximize the golden hour lighting. Then they're having the reception at the visitor center with dancing until midnight. Saturday afternoon, the exact same time as Rebecca's ceremony in Charleston. While my family sipped champagne and pretended I didn't exist, I could be capturing someone else's joy and creating content that might actually matter. You know what? Yes, I'll do it. The decision felt right immediately. I'll be your assistant, Sarah practically squealed with delight. This is going to be incredible. I'll text the couple tonight and let them know I'm bringing additional support for social media content. They're going to love it. We spent the rest of the evening planning logistics. Sarah filled me in on her shooting style, the timeline, and what kind of behind-the-scenes content might work. She also mentioned the bride specifically requested that all content be immediately shareable, since they hope to use their wedding as a launching pad for a joint business venture. By the time we parted ways, I felt energized in a way I hadn't in weeks. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I was going to be part of something creative and meaningful, something completely separate from my family's drama. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. I researched the venue, studied trending wedding hashtags, and developed a social media strategy that could help maximize the couple's reach. I found myself thinking less about Rebecca's wedding and more about the creative possibilities ahead. Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Carol, Rebecca's mother. Amanda, honey, I heard about the wedding situation, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I want you to know it wasn't personal. Rebecca just wants everything perfect. And you know how sensitive you can be about family matters. Sensitive. Just another word for outspoken, dressed up to sound nicer. I understand completely, I said. I hope she has a beautiful day. You're being so mature about this. I have to say I'm impressed with how you're handling it. Maybe this will be a learning experience for you about being more flexible with family expectations. I bit back my immediate response. Instead, I said, I'm actually working that weekend anyway, so it worked out. Working on a Saturday? Yes, I'm assisting with a wedding, professional development opportunity. After we hung up, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was focused on something that excited me. Something that had nothing to do with proving myself to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth including. Friday morning, Sarah and I met at her studio to review equipment and final details. She'd been in contact with the couple, and they were thrilled to have additional social media support. They specifically said they want their wedding to inspire others, Sarah told me as we packed camera gear. They're not trying to impress anyone. They just want to share their happiness. The contrast with my family's approach couldn't have been starker. Rebecca's wedding was about appearance and status, creating the perfect image for magazines and social media envy. This couple wanted to share genuine joy. I pulled up Instagram and glanced at the latest posts from my cousins, all of them sharing excitement about the Charleston weekend. Group photos at airports, shots of elegant hotels, behind-the-scenes glimpses of preparations. They were all using Rebecca's hashtag, creating a digital trail of their perfect family celebration. Something occurred to me then. Something that made my pulse quicken. They weren't the only ones who knew how to create compelling social media content. And they weren't the only ones with access to a beautiful wedding. Ready to create something amazing tomorrow? Sarah asked, shouldering her camera bag. More than ready, I said. And I meant it. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. I woke up feeling purposeful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. While my family was probably having their elegant brunch in Charleston, I was preparing to be part of something that felt infinitely more meaningful. Sarah picked me up at 11 a.m., and we drove to Garden of the Gods with her car packed full of equipment. The drive gave us time to review strategy. I've been thinking about the social media angle, I told her as we headed south on I-25. This location is already incredibly photogenic. But what if we focus on capturing raw emotion instead of just pretty pictures? People connect with authenticity more than perfection. That's exactly what I was thinking, Sarah agreed. This couple has genuine chemistry. I want to capture that connection, not just pose them in beautiful settings. When we arrived, I was struck by how different the atmosphere was from what I'd expected. There were no frantic coordinators or stressed family members arguing. Instead, there was calm excitement, like everyone genuinely wanted to be there. The bride, Maya, was getting ready in a suite at the visitor center with just her sister and best friend. No massive bridal party, no elaborate glam squad, just intimate moments with the people who mattered most. You must be Amanda, Maya said when Sarah introduced us. Thank you so much for helping. Having someone who understands social media is exactly what we needed. She was stunning in an understated way, wearing a flowing dress that looked ethereal. But what struck me most was how relaxed and happy she seemed. There was no bridezilla energy, no stress about perfection. She was simply excited to marry the person she loved. Tell me about your vision for sharing this day, I said, pulling out my phone. We want people to see that love doesn't have to be complicated or expensive to be meaningful, Maya explained. We planned this wedding in 6 weeks because we realized we were spending more time talking about getting married than actually being engaged. We want to show other couples that it's okay to prioritize your relationship over others' expectations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a couple who'd chosen authenticity over appearances, while my family had excluded me for being too real for their perfect image. I spent the morning capturing behind-the-scenes moments as Maya and her small bridal party prepared. The natural light was perfect, and every shot felt genuine and unforced. Meanwhile, Sarah was working with the groom, Tyler, and his friends. From what I could see, they were having just as much fun, laughing and sharing stories instead of stressing about perfection. At 2:30 p.m., We made our way to the ceremony site among the red rock formations. I'd seen Garden of the Gods countless times, but never transformed into a wedding venue. The natural beauty of the towering rocks created a backdrop no amount of money could buy. As guests arrived, I noticed how diverse and genuinely happy the crowd was. These weren't people attending out of obligation. They were friends and family who clearly adored the couple. I started taking candid shots of guests, capturing their reactions to the stunning ceremony setup. The natural beauty combined with the intimate gathering created an atmosphere that felt magical and authentic. At exactly 3 p.m., the ceremony began. Tyler stood at the altar with tears in his eyes as Maya walked down the aisle. Not to traditional wedding music, but to an acoustic version of the song from their first date. There was something so personal about that choice. As I captured the ceremony, I couldn't help thinking about what was happening at the exact same moment, 1,500 miles east. Rebecca was probably walking down her own aisle, surrounded by elaborate florals and 100 guests in designer clothes. The contrast couldn't have been starker, but what struck me most was the emotion. Maya and Tyler couldn't stop looking at each other, couldn't stop smiling, could barely get through their vows without tearing up. Their joy was so genuine and infectious that I found myself emotional behind the camera. After they kissed and were pronounced married, guests erupted in cheers that echoed off the rock walls. It was pure celebration, uncomplicated by pretense. During cocktail hour, I started editing and posting photos. I crafted captions highlighting authentic emotion and natural beauty, using hashtags that would reach people interested in intimate weddings and genuine love stories. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, posts were getting hundreds of likes and comments from people moved by the authenticity. Complete strangers were sharing the photos, talking about how refreshing it was to see a wedding focused on love instead of spectacle. "This is exactly what we hoped for," Tyler told me during the reception. "We want people to see that you don't need to spend a fortune or stress yourself out to have a meaningful wedding. You just need to focus on what really matters." As evening wore on, the social media momentum continued building. Photos were being shared across platforms with people commenting about how beautiful and authentic the celebration looked. Several wedding blogs had already reached out about featuring it. I found myself completely absorbed in the creative process, in capturing and sharing something genuinely meaningful. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about my family's rejection. I was focused on something bigger than myself, something bringing joy to thousands of people I'd never met. As the reception moved into full swing with dancing under string lights, I realized something important had shifted. I wasn't angry about being excluded anymore. I was grateful, because if I'd been in Charleston sitting through another family event where I had to monitor my words and minimize my personality, I never would have experienced this. My phone buzzed with notifications as posts continued gaining traction, but more importantly, it buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw your posts. Looks beautiful. Call me tomorrow." I smiled and put the phone away. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight was about celebrating love and authenticity, and I wasn't going to let family drama intrude. Sunday morning brought a revelation that changed everything. I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly. When I checked the metrics on the wedding posts, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The content from Maya and Tyler's wedding had exploded overnight. What started as a few hundred likes had turned into something viral. The main ceremony video I'd posted had over 50,000 views, and engagement was climbing exponentially. Comments poured in from around the world, with people sharing their own stories about choosing authenticity over expectation. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was the tone. People weren't just liking pretty pictures. They were genuinely moved by the story. Couples were tagging each other, saying things like, "This is what I want our wedding to be like." I screenshot the analytics and sent them to Sarah, who called immediately. "Amanda, this is insane," she said. "I've never had wedding content perform like this. My business inquiries have tripled overnight." "It's because it was real," I said, scrolling through more comments. "People are hungry for authenticity. They're tired of weddings that look like magazine spreads but feel empty." As I was talking to Sarah, another call came in. It was Maya. "Amanda, I don't know what you did, but our wedding is everywhere," Maya said, laughing with disbelief. "Tyler and I just woke up to messages from people all over the world. Wedding planners want to feature our story, and we've gotten inquiries about the business we're launching. This is beyond anything we imagined." I explained the reach and engagement we'd achieved, and how the authentic storytelling had resonated with people craving something real. "Would it be okay if I continued sharing content over the next few days?" I asked. "I think this story has momentum, and it could help other couples see alternatives to traditional wedding pressure." "Absolutely," Maya said without hesitation. "Tyler and I talked about it this morning, and we want to hire you officially. Would you be interested in managing our social media as we launch our venture?" The offer was tempting, but I already had a full-time job. Still, the success of the wedding content had sparked something in me I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, of creating something that mattered to people. After I hung up, I spent time crafting follow-up posts that would keep momentum going. I shared behind-the-scenes moments, details about vendors who'd made the day special, and quotes from Maya and Tyler about their philosophy on love and marriage. Each post performed better than the last. By noon, the wedding hashtag I'd created was trending locally, and several major wedding accounts had shared our content to their millions of followers. That's when my phone started ringing with calls from my family. The first was from my cousin Lisa, who'd been at Rebecca's wedding. "Amanda, what is this wedding you're posting about?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's all over my feed. People keep sharing it and talking about how beautiful and authentic it is." "I helped photograph a wedding yesterday," I said simply. "The couple was wonderful, and the story resonated with people." "Yesterday? But that was when Rebecca's wedding was happening. Where did you even find another wedding to attend?" There was accusation in her voice that I didn't appreciate, as if I'd somehow manufactured this opportunity just to compete with Rebecca's big day. My friend is a photographer and needed assistance with social media content. It worked out perfectly since I wasn't invited to Rebecca's wedding anyway. Lisa went quiet for a moment. "The posts are getting more engagement than Rebecca's wedding content." "A lot more." That's when it hit me. While I'd been focused on celebrating Maya and Tyler's authentic love story, my family had been documenting Rebecca's elaborate celebration. And their carefully curated content about the perfect Charleston wedding was being completely overshadowed by our genuine, heartfelt post from Colorado. "That's not really my concern," I said, though I could feel a spark of satisfaction. I was just doing my job. After Lisa hung up, I checked Rebecca's wedding hashtag out of curiosity. Her posts were beautiful, perfectly staged, exactly what you'd expect from a high-end destination wedding. But the engagement was surprisingly low for the amount of money and effort that had clearly gone into the event. The comments were polite but generic, the kind of responses you get when people feel obligated to like something but aren't genuinely moved. My phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. "Amanda, I need to understand what's happening," she said, skipping pleasantries. "Your cousin's wedding posts are being overshadowed by some other wedding that happened the same day. People are commenting on Rebecca's photos, asking why her wedding wasn't as authentic as this other one they keep seeing." I could hear the frustration in her voice, the confusion about how the family's carefully planned perfect event was being upstaged by something they hadn't even known was happening. "I was working," I said, using the same calm tone I'd maintained all week. "I helped document a beautiful wedding, and people connected with the story. But people are making comparisons, Amanda. They're saying this other wedding looked more meaningful than Rebecca's. Some comments are actually criticizing how much money was spent on flowers and decorations when this other couple had something so simple and beautiful. The irony was perfect. My family had excluded me because they thought I would cause drama at their elegant event. Instead, by simply doing good work and sharing an authentic story, I'd inadvertently created a situation where their expensive, curated celebration looked shallow by comparison. "I'm sorry people are making comparisons," I said, though I wasn't sorry at all. "That wasn't my intention." "Well, what was your intention?" Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you deliberately tried to upstage Rebecca's wedding. There it was. The accusation I'd been waiting for. Even when I wasn't present, even when I'd been nothing but supportive, I was still somehow the problem. My intention was to do my job well, I said, letting steel creep into my voice. I helped document a couple's special day, and I shared their story in a way that resonated with people. The fact that it coincided with Rebecca's wedding is just timing. Amanda, you need to understand how this looks. People are talking about how much more beautiful and meaningful this other wedding was. It's embarrassing for Rebecca. Maybe the problem isn't that I shared something beautiful, I said, my patience fraying. Maybe the problem is that you're all so focused on appearances and status that you've forgotten what actually matters to people. Silence on the line. I can't believe. You're being so callous about this, my mother finally said. Rebecca is family. You should be supporting her, not competing with her. I wasn't competing with anyone. I was excluded from her celebration, remember? You told me I was too outspoken for a refined event. So I found somewhere else to be, and I did something meaningful with my time. But now it looks like what? Like I'm capable of creating something beautiful and authentic without your permission? Like maybe the person you thought was too outspoken actually has value to offer? I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath, but I wasn't done. You know what, Mom? I spent years trying to make myself smaller so you wouldn't be embarrassed by me. I watched my words, minimized my personality, and let you all treat me like I was some kind of liability. And you still decided I wasn't good enough to include in a family celebration. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. You decided I was too much trouble, so you excluded me. And while you were all having your perfect drama-free wedding, I was out creating something that actually touched people's hearts. Something real. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unresolved tension. So what happens now? My mother finally asked, her voice smaller than before. Now I continue doing work that matters to me, I said. And maybe you all figure out why an amateur social media manager created content that resonated with more people than your professional, magazine-worthy celebration. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I'd never spoken to my mother that way before. Had never directly confronted the family dynamics that had made me feel like an outsider my entire life. But instead of guilt or regret, I felt something else entirely. Liberation. The afternoon brought a cascade of calls from various family members, each with their own version of concern. By the fourth call, I'd stopped answering numbers I recognized, but I couldn't ignore the metrics. The wedding content was still climbing, now approaching 100,000 views across all platforms. Wedding planners, photographers, and venues were reaching out to both Maya and me, wanting to collaborate or feature the story. More importantly, the comments had evolved from simple appreciation to deeper discussion about wedding culture and what celebration should really mean. People were sharing their own stories about pressure they'd felt to have expensive, elaborate weddings that didn't reflect their values. I found myself at the center of a conversation I'd never intended to start, but one that clearly needed to happen around 4 p.m. Sarah arrived at my apartment with coffee and pastries, looking as overwhelmed as I felt. My phone hasn't stopped ringing, she said, settling onto my couch. I've gotten more business inquiries in one day than I usually get in a month. But I also got a very interesting call that I think you should know about. From who? A producer from a lifestyle show. They want to do a segment on authentic weddings versus traditional elaborate ones. They specifically mentioned your social media strategy and how the content went viral. I stared at her. They want to interview me? They want to interview both of us, plus Maya and Tyler. The angle is about how genuine emotion and authentic storytelling can be more powerful than expensive productions. Sarah paused, studying my face. But here's the thing I think you'll find interesting. They also reached out to your cousin about featuring her wedding as the contrast example. My stomach dropped. What? Apparently, someone connected to the show saw both weddings trending and thought it would make compelling television. The idea is to show two different approaches to wedding celebration and let viewers decide which feels more meaningful. I could only imagine how my family was reacting. Being asked to participate in a show that would essentially pit their expensive traditional celebration against my authentic, intimate alternative would be their worst nightmare. Did Rebecca agree to participate? From what I understand, she declined. But the producers seem to think that just made the story more interesting. They're calling it the wedding that went viral while the family watched. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. My family had excluded me to avoid drama, and their attempt to have a drama-free celebration had created the biggest drama of all. 3 months after the wedding weekend that changed everything, I was sitting in a television studio in Los Angeles, preparing for what would become the most satisfying moment of my professional life. The lifestyle show that had initially reached out to Sarah and me had evolved their concept into something much bigger. What started as a simple segment about authentic weddings had become a full episode called When Real Goes Viral. The wedding that outshone the family. But the real twist was that Rebecca had also agreed to participate. After we'd had several honest conversations in the weeks following the viral moment, she'd become an advocate for authentic celebration and wanted to share her story about learning from the pressure she'd felt to create the perfect image. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked as we sat in the green room. "Not nervous," I said. "Excited. This feels like the culmination of everything that started that weekend." The past few months had been transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. My new role as senior content strategist had exceeded all expectations. The clients I worked with were seeing unprecedented engagement rates, and my team had developed a reputation for creating campaigns that actually moved people instead of just impressing them. More importantly, the success had given me a platform to talk about authenticity in an industry obsessed with artificial perfection. As I walked onto the set, I felt a surge of confidence that had everything to do with knowing I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The host, Maria Chen, had a warm presence that immediately put me at ease. "We're here with Amanda Rodriguez, the digital content strategist whose wedding content went viral and sparked a national conversation about authenticity and celebration," Maria began. "Amanda, take us back to that weekend. You'd been excluded from your cousin's wedding, and instead of staying home, you chose to document someone else's celebration. What was going through your mind?" "Honestly, I was hurt," I said. "Being excluded from a family event because you're considered too outspoken forces you to examine what that really means. In my case, it meant I cared too much about honesty and wasn't willing to pretend everything was perfect when it wasn't. And that quality your family saw as problematic turned out to be exactly what audiences were craving." Exactly. People are exhausted by content that looks perfect but feels empty. When we shared Maya and Tyler's genuine emotions and authentic celebration, it resonated because it was real. "You can't manufacture that kind of connection," the interview continued, covering the professional opportunities that had emerged, the shift in my family relationships, and the broader impact on wedding culture. When Rebecca joined us on set, she looked polished and confident, but there was also vulnerability in her expression. "Rebecca, you had what most people would consider a dream wedding," Maria said. "Destination location, unlimited budget, featured in magazines. But when your cousin's content went viral the same weekend, it sparked some difficult realizations for you." "It did," Rebecca said steadily. "I spent months planning every detail of my wedding, and I barely remember actually getting married. I was so focused on how everything looked that I missed the whole point of the celebration." As the cameras stopped rolling, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with hurt and exclusion had led to professional success, stronger family relationships, and a platform to advocate for authenticity. But more than that, it had proven something I'd always suspected but never had the courage to test: that being genuinely myself, even when it made others uncomfortable, was not just acceptable, it was valuable. The outspoken family member who had been excluded for caring too much about honesty had become the person who helped everyone else discover the value of authenticity. The rejection that had felt like an ending had actually been the beginning of everything that mattered.